Hey everybody, Nathan Fowkes here. So I am here to talk to you about lighting design. And so first off, I want to thank you for your interest in joining me here. You and I and all of us, we have the same goal. We want to be the best artists that we can be. We want to have the ability to reach out and to connect with our audience and do something that's really special, something that they're excited about, something that really lifts them up. And one of our primary tools to do that is lighting design. So ImagineFX has given me this opportunity to spend a little bit of time with you here to go over some basics on how you can build up a scene with a variety of lighting circumstances, to tell different kinds of stories, to create different kinds of moods, because as a concept artist, you have to have an exceptional versatility. To tell a story in its entirety, you've got to be able to create just about every emotion that you can think of visually. And in part, you have to rely on lighting design to do that. So I want to take you through some different variations. Now we do have a limited amount of time here, and so if you'll stick with me till the end, I'm going to throw out some options for you, some resources where you can dig in a little bit deeper and really master this subject. That'll come at the end. So you can see in my title card here some samples of where I've gone with this demonstration. And so let's take a look at what my starting point was, and then we can dive right into the demo from there. My starting point was actually sitting on top of one of those double-decker tourist tour buses on the streets of London, snapping some pictures here and there. And one of the pictures that I snapped is here of the Westminster Abbey complex. And Westminster Abbey is a gorgeous building and series of buildings that has been very heavily covered in art and in photography. And so I'll be honest with you, I kind of like how the Abbey is actually covered up. This is the main entrance of the Abbey back here. And with apologies to the Westminster Abbey people, your building is too good. It's so good that we've all seen it. Well, I actually really liked this building here in the forefront, and I like the trees kind of framing coming along here. And even though this is just frankly a bad photograph, quickly snapped from the top of a tour bus, I always wanted to do something with it. So I'm going to take this photo simply as a starting point. I'm going to ignore all of the gorgeous, beautiful detail in the image, because this is not a detailed demo. It's not a rendering demo. It's not even a demo about Photoshop tools. It's a demo that's meant to make lighting the main event. So with this as inspiration only, I'm going to do the simplest of sketches and make it my own. That's it. And that is my starting point of making it my own. Now don't panic, that's not my demo. This is the very super quick initial sketch. Now I love sketching in ink. It's absolutely not something that you need to do. You can sketch in any medium that will give you a full value range. I don't mind at all if you do your tonal sketching very directly in Photoshop. But when I have the luxury, I just really enjoy getting pen to paper, pencil to paper. It's fun for me, and it's much more likely that I find my own lighting design instead of simply copying photo reference. So I just did a little sketch here. I wanted to make that building that I mentioned the main event here, put a little bit of perspective in it, dramatized it a little bit, in fact quite a bit further from the original, steeper perspective, so we're looking more up at it, give it a little bit more drama. And that's just with an orange Prismacolor Verithin pencil in a pocket-sized sketchbook. So there it is, the sketchbook. It's called Hand-Made by Global Art Materials, little pocket-size sketchbook. The pencil, as I mentioned, is an orange Prismacolor Verithin pencil. The brush pen that I use right here, that is a Pentel number 101 black water-soluble ink. And then I like to use a water brush. This is just an empty brush you can buy. It has a brush tip on the end, and you just manually fill it with water. And that's all. Everything I do in this particular sketchbook is just with those three tools, nothing else. So next step, I take the brush pen and just brush in my dark tones. And then from there, I take the water brush and I just kind of push that ink around, and I'm thinking about the design of my light. I really want to pull our eye right up to this main event right here. I want this sketch to be about something. And so I want to pull our eye up here with the drama of the clouds, the light falling across this building. So that's an active area, and the other areas will generally be more passive in a lighting sense. Next step, a little bit tighter, a little bit more attention to edges, and then refining it and bringing the sketch to a finish. And when I say a finish, this is a super quick sketch, and it's a very loose sketch, but a very enjoyable way for me to quickly get ideas down. So our first major point then is that lighting needs to be about something. If you're simply copying photo reference, then you've set that low ceiling for yourself. But if you're thinking about what the image is about and how you can use light to tell that story or to best portray your environment, that is your primary starting point. And so I want to recommend to you, there's no reason you have to use ink, but I want you to get outside and I want you to sketch. Because when you get outside and sketch, you have to make hard decisions. You go out into a location and you can literally see millions of details, millions of them. And with a very limited media like a pencil or a brush in black and white only, you have to take those millions of bits of information and distill them down into a simple, clear statement. And that takes practice, and it takes thinking. It does not happen by chance. So we have our starting point. Let's go live and take this right into Photoshop. So this is standard Photoshop. Nothing special here except for one thing. You see in the upper right hand corner I have Magic Picker, my color picker. Now that doesn't come with Photoshop. That's an extension that you've got to go out and buy. But you can just type Magic Picker in the web. It'll come right up. It's fairly inexpensive. In fact, very inexpensive considering the value that it gives to you in its usage. So I love it. I can easily pick the value and the saturation of each color, just working around through that. So that's the one addition here to standard basic Photoshop. So my first step is to create selections for everything. Everything I'm going to use. You see that little lasso tool there? I'm assuming that you're very familiar with that, and that's exactly what I use in its different versions. And I save those selections as channels. You can see as I go through here that I have saved a selection for every single element. The windows, the trees, the sky, some individual details. I've done that for everything. So let's whip out a brush now, because this is the brush that I'm going to be using for probably 90% of what I'm going to do here. Now I believe this is a standard Photoshop brush, but to be honest with you, we've handed brushes around back and forth at the studio so much I don't even know for sure. So if it's not, you can just screen capture the shape of it right off of here. But I've just put a few selections onto it so it has a little bit of an organic feel. I want a nice softness to it. I want a pin pressure on it as well. And so let me show you what I'm going to check off here. If we go to the brush tip shape, and I'm just going to check off the texture. And this is a standard Photoshop texture, standard pattern, and any texture that has a little bit of a grit to it, something like this one, will do the trick. So I have, you see the scales there at 41%, texture each tip, and I have the mode on subtract, which is just a nice, soft, subtle application of the texture, but you should really go in and experiment with all of those. Really make these brushes your own so they do what you need and want them to do. Now, pen pressure is going to be pretty important to this. I'm going to want an opacity to the stroke based on my pressure here. So I have transfer and the opacity pen pressure checked off, and that's all. That gives me the brush that I'm going to use for almost everything. In fact, for this first version of the image that I'm going to do, I'm going to use this brush exclusively, except for one other brush that has a leafy texture that I'll show you in a little bit for some of the trees. Otherwise, that's it. 2 brushes. So here are some of the kinds of strokes that this particular brush will make for you. So by now you're really itching to go, I know, so we can dive right in. I'm going to tint this warm in the color balance. Just grab that color balance and shift it towards red because I want a warm underpainting, a lot like traditional landscape painters do, to have a nice warmth and earthiness peeking out from underneath. That's my starting point. And I'm going to want a warm backlit glow coming through those clouds. So what's the simplest statement here I can make? Remember, we're always trying to find the simplest statement first. Well, light up in the sky, graduating down to darker values. That's the simplest light and dark statement. And the warmer yellows up on top, graduating down to some neutrals down at the bottom. Now I'm blocking in my sky and my landscape using those selections. I put some grays, as you saw, up in the sky, leaving a little bit of yellow light peeking through the sky to really bring visual interest to the crest of those buildings. And with that selection on, with that channel turned on, I'm now blocking in my big building shapes. I want to give them a gray quality. It's a gray local color, and it's going to be fairly gray lighting. The backlighting is going to have some warmth, some yellow, but the overall lighting is just an overcast watercolor gray. Now I'm blocking in those trees. I'd made a selection previously so that all I had to do was turn that selection on and paint into it with a green, a little darker, a little greener than what was there. You can tell I have this sped up because we just want to get the gist of where this thing is going. And so I'm painting in to that side, creating a little bit of layering there. I have the sky, I have the background buildings, I have the midground buildings, I have the foreground trees, and then I have the foreground ground plane. And those are the terms I'm thinking of for space. So I now turn on my selection, my channel, for windows. I have all the different windows pre-created, so all I have to do with those selections, the selections are turned on, but then I hit Control Hide or Command Hide for you in a Mac. And so they're on, but they're hidden, and I can just take my brush and paint in those shapes, push and pull back and forth, and bring in a little bit of detail work and a little bit of structure into this. And this is why I love this pre-selected imagery so much. It lets me work so quickly. It lets me be very direct. Even in the highlights, I pre-created the shapes for the highlights. You saw me turn that on as usual and then just paint right into it with a nice warm color. I want that sunlight streaming in from the side and just kind of kissing the tops of those buildings there. Remember, this is about emphasis. It's about where we want the eye to go. It's about what we want the image to be about. So there's that brush that I promised. All it is some leafy shapes with pressure sensitivity turned on and size sensitivity turned on based on the brush stroke. That's all it is. And so I'm layering in some strokes, some foliage. I like to put them down and then copy the layer and blur that layer because remember, I want that softness, I want a misty kind of a feeling, and that's my process here to create that. Putting in those layers of leaves, they're falling across and describing top planes because that's the direction that the lighting's coming from. Now to help out my foreground, I want to have a street lamp. street lamp in there is going to give me a nice little accent in the foreground. At this point, I really don't know where I want to put it. That's the luxury of Photoshop, right? You build things on separate layers. You can push, pull, stretch, move them around until you find the right spot for them. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm trying out the idea of having a second one, but I've decided on just one up there in the foreground. Why? Because I want to keep your attention focused towards the center of the image. And that's why I decided on just that one lamp. Now it's time to add a little bit of detail work to those highlights so I can dig in there. And so I'm just adding some texture to my brush. That's all the difference is here. I'm giving it a much heavier, grittier texture because I want it to feel like there's light kind of sparkling across a selection and a suggestion of detail work up there. So putting those warms in, but at the same time, I don't want this thing to be monochromatic. You know, life and surfaces and just about everything we see have a certain kind of richness to them. These stones have rich variations within them. Qualities of light have variation. So you see me actually bringing green in there. Now it's not a cold color. I guess I'm not specifically doing warms and cools. But by bringing that bit of green in there, it's giving me a nice variety. So I'm jumping ahead. I'm playing a little bit with the contrast there. You see me just pushing and pulling, making sure I have the right balance of the masses of tones. I'm also a little bit concerned about the shape of the building there. It's a little bit unbalanced, I felt there in that the left hand corner. So I just grabbed that layer and I pulled that material over for a little bit more of a balanced shape. So this is a stage where I turn on and off selections, I push and pull, I fine tune, I add a little bit of detail work, and just slowly try and bring some finesse to the buildings. This is a comp, this is not a polished image, but I do need to put a suggestion of detail work in the most important areas, and this is where the photo reference can be very helpful to us. As you can see in the window, I've taken advantage of some of that photo reference when I was making my selection. But at the same time, I've cautioned you about overusing photo reference and making sure you make the images your own. And what you're going to see later on is I actually decide against a lot of that detail work and kind of go back into it and make it more painterly and, once again, make it my own. Okay, so you saw me do a quick reverse there. And I do that intentionally. I like to see my work reversed from time to time, so I just flip it in Photoshop. It gives me a fresh look. It lets me see where some of my mistakes are. And I'll take a look and maybe make some refinements, and then I'll flip it back. So again, back and forth, and I'm just checking the grouping of the shapes and the values of light and shadow. I want to carefully control where the contrast is and where the contrast is not. So you see me just making very subtle changes to some of the lights and shadows so that some things group together a little bit more so they don't call attention to themselves, and some things separate themselves from the group so that they do call more attention to themselves. I'm designing emphasis. I'm designing contrast. I'm deciding what this image is about and subduing anything that might be a distraction from that. Okay, a little touch up on that lamp, a little last minute cleanup on those values, and then bingo! We have our finished product. Now you can see that I did a little bit of fine tuning beyond where the video stopped. I slept on it. I stepped away from it for a little while, came back, took a fresh look, and just did a couple of little tweaks. I slightly adjusted the cool temperatures. I slightly brightened it and just hit a couple of tiny details, just a little bit of fine tuning that makes this a base that we can move forward from. So I hope you like how this turned out. We had some fun here, putting this together, but I've got to be frank with you. This is not good enough. It is not nearly good enough. You know what it's like out there. You know how devastatingly good some of these artists out there. We have to learn how to stand taller and reach higher. Our audience expects it from us. They have been waiting all night for what we can give them. They get so excited, our audience, about what we do that they camp out in front of the movie theater so they can be the first ones to see it. They camp out in front of Target or Walmart so they can be the first ones to play the new game. And what they're looking for is a showstopper, a jaw-dropper, and we have to deliver. And so simply creating an environment is not good enough. We have to make sure our environments go far beyond that. Our environments, our lighting design have to be an experience for our audience. We have to make the sky, the sea, the land cry out and create that experience that our audience is looking for. So let's do it. Let's see if we can deliver. So let's grab this and let's push it way down. We want some drama here. We want to really bring it to life. We have to have that life, that action, that flash of lightning and thunder. We have to give it something to contrast with. And so if we're going to go for a rolling boom of thunder here, and that's what my idea is, then I'm going to darken it down. I also want to really emphasize the verticals here. We want this dominating, very firm, very present feeling to the architecture. So I want to give those big, strong verticals, I want to give those some emphasis. And that's why I'm repeating, you see those vertical kinds of shapes in the background. So I'm thinking contrast here. I'm thinking warm and cool contrast, which you see starting to appear in there. I'm doing that both in the background in the sky, and I'm doing it in the buildings. I'm thinking value contrast, light and shadow, and I'm thinking edge contrast, hard edges versus soft edges, okay? So when we're designing lighting, those are three of the major things that we think about. How that lighting creates contrasts, temperature contrasts, value or light and dark contrasts, and edge contrast. Because an important part of this scene right here is going to be which edges completely disappear into the sky. We're going that far in our emphasis, making some things completely go away so other things can be even more powerful. So I've got to get those buildings lit based on the planes. We have right-hand planes facing one way, left-hand planes facing the other way in that central building. So I want to get those cool temperatures in there. And I'm setting myself up for a lightning strike that's about to come in from the upper right-hand side. Getting a nice flow of light coming down from the sky into the foreground, getting that feeling of the interaction of weather, land, and sky. I'm coming in, I've got to get some lighting onto the top planes and my trees there. And so I'm getting some warmer lighting coming into the top planes on the right-hand side. I'm getting some nice icy cold lighting, just suggesting on the right-hand side of the trees, and now I'm ready for my lightning strike. I took first pass at it, you saw, and didn't like that shape, so I put a second one in here. I'm happy with that. I made a copy of it, and I turned that copy blue as you just saw. And that blue copy goes underneath. I put a blur on it and it gives a nice glow. I have a blue glow surrounding that pure white lightning strike. And then with the finger pressure tool there, just the blending tool, I'm just pushing those blues around a little bit because I need a nice organic, actiony feeling to that lightning strike. Pushing and pulling it, giving it a nice flash and organic feel, and a connection to those buildings. I need a nice flash of light surrounding it. So behind it on a separate layer, I'm going to put a nice kind of electric electric glow to it. A little bit of ozone, that flash of ozone that's created by lightning there. All those electrons just flying through the air. It's pure energy here, folks. And I want a nice bright light at the source there. Up at the top, you saw me just drop a nice bright light to really say that this lightning is coming from somewhere. And I'm enhancing that now. And I'm going to continue to do a good amount of fine-tuning on this, but you'll see that once I get the light hitting the trees and the ground plane, I'll be pretty much done. That's how simple I want to keep it. And that's the point I want to especially make for you here in this part 2 of this demo. Simple is good. Sometimes we make these things too complicated. Sometimes we feel like we have to rely on the detail because we don't have the experience to know what else to do. But if you have a powerful, simple statement in there, you can leave so much else unsaid that these images get done quickly. You meet that tough deadline, and shockingly, the images come out better for it. It's not a compromise, it's an improvement. So I'm hitting that ground plane. I reverse the image here to get a fresh look at it. And I hit a bit of contrasty edges on that ground plane because a lightning strike has a nice hard edge. The light cast by a lightning strike can have a very hard edge. And so I just dropped a bit of a hard edge on that ground plane a moment ago. And then doing a little bit of fine tuning and clean up in that building. Flipping it back. Now, I really want a uniform feeling of vertical on this. The vertical is one of my core ideas on this version. And so I just put a motion blur on everything. I gave myself a flattened layer. I put a motion blur on it, and then I increase the sharpness. You see the sharpness increase on there? And that way everything has a vertical feel to it. And then on that sharpened layer, I just dropped it down into a transparency. So there's a little bit of a motion blur suggested on the entire image, and that gives it a nice vertical flow, and that helps unify everything towards my theme. A strong vertical nature with a powerful flash of lightning, and the cool temperatures of that flash of lightning enhanced by the surrounding darks and the nearby warm accents. And we've got it. Just like that. We've got it. So have we taken the drama far enough? Well, I think we have. But at the same time, you can reasonably say, well, gosh, Nathan, a lightning strike is just a single moment in time, and it's a nice gesture, it's a nice idea, but it's going to be very rare that I can get away with that as an overall lighting concept. And so my answer to you is zombies. I know, zombies were so last year. It's not really zombies. I want you to think about silhouetting and rim lighting as a lighting solution. Because here we have to change the emphasis. This is no longer primarily about the architecture. The architecture is now secondary, and we have to design for that. It's now all about the characters, and so we light accordingly. Good strong silhouettes and rim lights, in this case created by the torches, and cool atmospheric light gives us that change of emphasis. It gives it to us through lighting design. So a little while back, I had an opportunity to sit down and chat with an art director over at Pixar. And he also, like myself, is a teacher in his spare time. And he was opining a little bit about his students. He said, they're really worrying me. I mean, they can do really amazing creatures with all kinds of spikes, and then they can throw a blue filter on it. But if you ask them to paint, for instance, a sunny glen out in nature, they have no idea and no experience as to where to start. And what they seem to do is they hop on Google and search and desperately try and find a piece of photo reference that perfectly solves the problem because they don't have the internal knowledge on how to create that. Well, I've had a little bit of that same experience myself as a teacher. But I don't think I have to tell you and repeat myself again that as artists we have got to have a greater range than that. So let's do pink, shall we? I've been guilty of that so far. I've been going so hard for the drama that I've been doing dark and scary and frightening. Well, that's great. We love it. It's fantastic. But our range has to go way beyond that. So you're thinking, oh no, Nathan's going to go pink. Yeah, Nathan, we saw your name in the credits on one of those Tinkerbell movies, so we know that you know how to do pink. But I want you to go watch that Tinkerbell movie. I really do. Even if you don't have a daughter, go hide in a room where no one else knows that you're watching Tinkerbell. And I want you to watch The Pirate Fairy, Walt Disney's The Pirate Fairy. It's part of Peter Pan's Never Never Land. It's a story of how Captain Hook became Captain Hook. And I want you to look at the lighting in that movie. I'm so proud of what we put in that movie. I co-color scripted the movie with another artist named Fred Warder, and we designed the color and the lighting in that show from top to bottom. And I think you'll be quite pleasantly surprised at the range of mood that we got in that show. Check it out. And as you stick with me here, you'll see that I won't be able to resist going back to the drama. After all, I was a color and lighting stylist on How to Train Your Dragon, a show that I'm very proud of. So let's do pink here. So I'm going to go back to the base image and rework my lighting again for you. See what we can come up with. As promised, there she blows. I'm starting with the sky. I'm always looking for contrast, even if we are going pink and kind of illuminated sunlight. So I like that little bit of blue in the sky. And I'm going to transition from that blue into some of those pinks, into something cooler. You see the purples in the buildings that I'm getting in there. And then the further buildings are going to get a little bit cooler, a little bit more atmospheric, and then jumping right into the trees. So now they've got to be pink trees, right? We're going to turn these into cherry blossom trees. We're taking this all the way, baby. We're just going to do this. We're going as far as we can with our concept. That's what we're doing each time. Remember, each thing we do, it's got to be a rolling boom of thunder. We have to be clear and committed. So I'm going to go for a cherry blossom, kind of a feel in the trees. The local color will be red. And then bringing those highlights onto there. Same brush, same idea, just wrapping light around those trees. Hitting hardest towards the upper part and then diminishing as it wraps around. Just imagine that you're illuminating a sphere. Simple statement. What are the simple lights and darks? What's the simplest statement of the kind of form that you're describing? And then we need that light falling across the ground plane, so we'll stream that in there. A little bit of a green transition there, where the yellow in the background meets the building, and fine-tuning a little bit, softening up those lights on the trees. I put a little bit of a blur on there, as you saw me do before, because we're still maintaining a sense of glow and luminosity. And now clouds. We got to hit those clouds. Once again, this is nothing fancy. This is just a brush that has a harder edge on one side and a softer edge on the other side. One side is kind of fluffy, the other side is just soft. And I have a size variation based on the pen pressure. That's all that is. You're going to do a better cloud brush than I am, so make one up. It's going to be great. Same thing here, some grass, harder edge on top, softer edge on the bottom, and I'm brushing in some grass shapes here, just to give ourselves a little bit of a ground plane, a little bit of solidity, a little bit of texture there to firmly root our feet on the ground. A little bit of fine tuning in those trees. I've got to put some cool lights on that shadow side. Remember, there's a blue sky. There's red or pink light coming in from the right-hand side, but there's blue light coming down from the sky, and I've got to represent that in the shadows. So you see my underpainting there, the previous version, and I'm popping back to that because now I'm going to paint and reveal that. I still have that underlayer that we started with sitting underneath, and so I've painted out a little bit of my overpaint to reveal some of the details of the underpainting, and now I'm going to work back into it. I need to hit those lights more firmly and hit them harder on that building because we now have a stronger, more dominant light source coming in from the right hand side. Just thinking about the lights and shadows, where would the light hit, what parts would be in shadow, and just piecing that together, keeping it simple. Quickly, simply dropping those lights in. Now there's going to be bounce light. With all that sunlight, remember, sunlight hits one object and it will bounce into the shadows of adjacent planes. So a moment ago you saw me putting those hot lights in shadowy underplanes. Bounce lights, we should call them. A little bit of atmosphere. I'm trying to control those hard edges. Remember, the side planes in the shadow are going to have some of those cool temperatures from the sky, and that just about does the trick for us. I hope you haven't been too frightened away by our anti-zombie image here. So I promised you guys that despite the tough deadlines, the time constraints, I was going to do 10 variations for you guys. Well, gosh, we're only on number 4 at this point. But don't look at your watch and start thinking, well, gosh, Nathan, I have deadlines too. I better let it go. I've got other stuff I've got to do. We can do this fast. And so I'm just going to roll through with you what I was able to come up with, because it's exactly the same process. The simple statement, quickly blocking in the simple lighting statement, and then being able to move forward from there. So from here, from our pink image, I went sunrise. What happens when sunshine streams through morning mist? Well, the great thing about this lighting scenario is that the atmosphere itself takes on a presence, takes on a character, because those warm rays of sunlight are streaming through that mist. But at the same time, especially in morning, you get a very azure blue sky overhead. If we were really at this location and looking straight up, we would see quite a blue sky. So we have all of that blue coming down from above, complementing all of those warms streaming in through the atmosphere with the sunshine. And so you get a brilliant glow of warmth surrounding the sun that penetrates even into the buildings and even starting into the foreground. But as you move further and further away from the sun, things get a little darker and a little cooler, and you get that vibration of warm and cool filling the atmosphere until the atmosphere itself feels like it's no longer a void. It's not an emptiness. It is a volume now filled with light. We've got to go back to the drama, right? We've got to go back to the drama. I couldn't resist. I had to do another dramatic one. And the push in this is the extremes of contrast. You already know about light and dark contrast. You already know about the red and the blue contrast. But the major contrast here, I think, is active versus passive, because to get that extreme of drama, I'm taking just about everything in the shadows. This is a very loose sketch. It's more fun that way. And everything that's in the darks is going down nearly to zero. Zero information. So much so that as the landscape moves up towards the sky, it completely disappears into it, so that we have a powerful active versus an extreme passive. So let's stick with nighttime here in this next one, but not in the extremes of contrast, because this one is no longer about that. This is our big opportunity to turn some lights on so that now it becomes something else once again. It's not about the sun. It's not primarily about the silhouette of the building, not anymore. It's not about characters inhabiting the scene or even about the volume of the atmosphere. Now it changes timbre, and it's about what's going on inside of that building. It's now a story moment that sets up something's happening in there. And most likely, if this were a movie or a game cinematic, the next scene would jump into that interior. This is an expositionary shot. This is all about light, right? I just wanted to prove that in the same way we hit this hard with lightning, a flash and a boom of thunder, that we can hit it just as hard with pure sunlight. And, well, we need a little bit of sweetness, but not the kind of sweetness that we got out of the sugar-coated pink image, but the kind of sweetness that at the same time has a moodiness to it that happens as light comes in from the side at sunset. You've all seen it, right? You've seen an overcast day where there's a gap right along the horizon off where the sun is. And that sunlight is able to stream through that small gap, even though it's cloud covered overhead, and we get those last warm rays of sun that caress the tops of those buildings. And I wanted a little bit more visual interest than that. I didn't want to do the same thing yet again, because there is a danger of repetition. We're doing the same scene over and over again. So I changed the bottom, the ground plane, and I put a river in there. What the heck, right? Let's take and reflect some of those purples from the sky down into the water down there, so that we have a nice repetition of color, a nice repetition of the lighting, so that it doesn't just become a red and purple image that grades down into the green trees, but we pick up that warm, vibrating purple down there. It makes the green foliage more potent, and it makes the ground plane more potent, so that we have an additional layer of visual interest in the scene. And birds, right? I just quickly threw a bunch of bird shapes in there, just to suggest that this is a scene and a moment in time that's filled with life. So we've just got one very brief live demo session to go, because we've got to go out with what this is all about. We'll prove that we don't need to always fall back on the crutch of drama and moodiness. Let's go out with pure light and sunshine. So, back to our original image, and I'm going to take it, and because I'm going to be painting right over top of it once again, I'm going to give it extra contrast. I'm going to heighten the contrast and the sharpness so it'll hold up as I just airbrush right over top of it. Airbrush a blue sky right over top, just a standard Photoshop brush with soft edges, a little bit of transparency on it. Tint those trees green. Tint some of the cools into the buildings, tint some of the warm bounce light into the lower parts of the buildings, really setting ourselves up for some hot but vibrant and alive sunshine. Of course, we need a nice field of green grass to do this right, so that's what I'm launching. And we can't just have green trees anymore. We've been doing green trees, well, except for the pink ones. So let's do a little bit of fall foliage to really liven this thing up. We're going to change the local color. We'll have one of our green trees. We've just turned it orange, and another one we've just turned to the reds, and then a hint of the fall colors coming into the one over there on the left. Just using that leafy brush again, just something that suggests a leafy shape. Right over top, giving ourselves a local color that we can work with. Now into the sky. I really want to hit those cyans in the sky and then get nice, clouds in there, nice luminous clouds. So the shadow shape up there in the clouds is going to be a little bit purplish, a hint of purple in there, so that that yellow light hitting them will really come out with some contrast. Sunshine streaming across those, what are those called? Cirrus? Is that what those clouds are called? Softening up those clouds in the sky. Giving some nice wind-blown edges to them. And by the way, you've noticed, and maybe it even frustrates you a bit, you see me shrinking down all the time. Well, I want to try and convince you that that's a good thing, because you need to see these images, or I should say me, I need to see these images as a whole. I need to make sure that the pieces work with the whole thing. So I'm constantly shrinking the image down and looking at it very small, almost as if it's just a simple tiny comp, because I've got to make sure the big simple statement's working. One of the keys to vibrant sunshine is bounce light. If you have lots of vibrant sunlight hitting surfaces, then that light is going to bounce into adjacent shadows, usually underplanes. So see me hitting any place that there's a strong underplane, especially in the windows, the doorways. I'm putting a warmth, a lighter, warmer tone to suggest that light is bouncing up from a sunlit ground. That's key. Warm bounce lights in the underplanes of the shadows and cool skylight coming down into the top and side planes of the shadows. That is the key. Shadows are a major key to making sunlight work. It's not just the light itself. Hitting the ground and the trees, then with the appropriate color of vibrant sunshine. Thinking about, once again, the shapes, just treating those trees like spheres, having the light hit the part of the sphere facing the sunlight, and then wrap around as it comes towards us and fall off as it curves away. Building that up, pushing and pulling. And I've got to get underplanes on those trees as well. Notice that bounce light coming up and hitting under those trees. And I'm fine-tuning that lighting, a little stronger lighting hitting the buildings there. Need to bring that out a little bit. You see how strong the bounce light is? And that's what I'm doing here. Bounce light, every underplane where there would be sunlight bouncing up into it. I'm trying very hard to hit those. That's what's going to unconsciously convince you and anyone on the street that this is a powerfully sunlit scene. So I'm paying extra attention to those bounce lights. Okay, and same thing on that street lamp. Cool light on the top planes, warm bounce light on the underplanes. It's that simple. That's what makes it feel, that's how shadows come alive. Little bit of fine-tuning to the architectural detail up there, and we're getting real close. I just need to hit the light, a little bit of suggestion, quick suggestion of detail or activity in that light. We really want the light sprinkling across the textures of that facade. And with that, we are done. We're done. All 10 of our lighting studies. But stick with me for just a minute or two, because as promised, I'd like to point you towards further resources. You're always welcome to check out my blog. It's just my name, nathanfowkes.blogspot.com, where I have what I'm currently up to, and if you want to scroll back through in time, or just click in the sidebar to go to the Google Gallery of all the images on the blog, you'll find demonstrations, you'll find past work and stuff that I hope you'll enjoy, and I hope will be a resource for you as well. Additionally, the second one listed here, I have a landscape sketching blog, all about getting outside, like we talked about at the top. I especially want to make you aware of my online classes that cover the topics that I believe we concept artists have to have an absolute mastery. So these two online classes, Environment Design and Designing with Color and Light, are from the fantastic people at schoolism.com. I have never worked with stronger artists or a more professional group of people, just go to schoolism.com. You'll find my 2 classes. Check them out. Additionally, if you are at all interested in some of the drawings that I showed, I'm a regular instructor at the Los Angeles Academy of Figurative Art, and I have some demonstrations and a 9-week online class with them as well. And that's portrait drawing in charcoal. And you can go right to it at latha.org. So I want to give a shout out to ImagineFX for giving me the opportunity to put this demonstration together for you. And I want to wish you the very best in your career as an artist.